Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Timothy. Good evening, Carol. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Sal, Timothy, Carol. Good to be back here.
It is good to be back in this somewhat warmer Sunday evening this evening here in Adelaide.
Yes.
So if you can hear me, could you please put yes in the chat box?
Hello, Felicity.
Hi, Felicity. Oh, yes.
Bit of a bounce there.
And
getting the bongs. Boing, boing. Yeah.
Yes, good evening, Steve. Good to see you.
G'day, Steve.
Timothy
Okay.
can hear us. Yes.
Cool.
So of course there's that lag. I often forget, but we don't go out exactly live. We go out with about 20 to 30 seconds lag, so we have to keep that in mind. Okay, Carol actually is about 10 feet away from me, so she can hear pretty well. No, she hearing you. Well, no, she has to hear you in the earbuds. Must be confusing for her because I'm talking about 20 seconds before she hears me.
Well, that says a lot, really.
That's right, yeah. Sluggish airwaves. Well, it's good to see you, everyone here tonight. Welcome once again. We're now at the fourth storyboard in this process. So it's the fourth of 4, but there's still one to go. But I'll let John tell you about that. Yeah, welcome. I've really been enjoying having your company for this series, and we've been learning a lot. Excuse me, about putting on webinars and getting the tech operating, and we've done a few cycles of few learning cycles there, as well as, of course, the brilliant content that John is bringing to us. So very grateful to everyone for all of that. John, do you want to say any other welcomes before I? What I'll do in a moment is just go through the notes of what today's about. Very short notes, and then we'll see the storyboard for today, and then hand that over to John. But before we go there, John.
Thanks, Sal. Yalada Dawangara. Big hello and welcome to all our good friends and relations out there in webinar land. And thank you, David, for your putting it on. I'd just like to, this storyboard, Sal, I won't go too much into it, but before I begin tonight, the storyboard is about cultural celebration, renewal, and decolonisation. Now, decolonisation, very hard to give a definitive definition, but decolonisation is not just a black issue, it's a journey that we all must take together. And decolonisations for First People, and if you keep in mind that the storyboards, they're written for Aboriginal people and Aboriginal gatherings, so some of the language is not necessarily direct to the audience here tonight, but most of it is. It's not that it's exclusive. It's just that it's written in a way that talks to Aboriginal people's cultural ears, I guess. And decolonisation for First Peoples, I think, is firstly about remembering, naming, connecting, and discarding those things which vex the spirit. It then becomes an act of centering the values, beliefs, and practices of Indigenous ways of being in all we do in our everyday acts. This, of course, can't happen without a mass change and shift in consciousness by all within our shared society, be we black, white, red or yellow. And it could be said the fact that we are engaging in this conversation, as we have been over the last 4 weeks to date, is in itself an act of decolonisation. It could be said decolonisation really is about remembering who you are rather than who the other may or may not be. And by who you are, I mean your own history, your own language, your own cultural values, beliefs and practices, etc. So I just wanted to put that on the table tonight as we head into the celebration storyboards.
Okay, so we call this one celebration. It is now time for us to move through denial and into the celebration of who we are as peoples with a unique and distinct culture and worldview. It's time to decolonise and revitalise our ancestral values, beliefs and practices. In many ways, Mother Earth is dependent on our reawakening to our interconnection and relationship with all things so that we can begin to live our lives as intended with peace and good health. And
Sorry, we are all Webber natives. Yes, indeed.
okay. I'll pass that over to you now, John.
You got the ditch?
You didn't hear the didge?
No, it's been and gone. Yeah,
it's been and gone. Yeah.
Okay. I am Garanjal. I come from where the ancestors sit. My song a call to memory. Father seed, mother womb, callers and carriers of all life. In the natural state of things, equilibrium is a shared responsibility. Each breath a ceremonial continuance. Without colour, without form, there is only light. By sacred fires, Gubadi gently calls, Pamayura Wangadi Dungai. Awakening the dancing ambers, he sings aloud the songs of memory. It was late evening and Warrnambool came as usual, and the next morning when the people looked, there up on the mountain, everything was as it was the day before, only they had all been turned to stone. And the law is there now for all to see. The people believe as long as the Gubadi rock stands, there will always be food animals around, but they are always troubled by the Dubu, or the demons, at night because they failed to go up the mountain. When the rock falls, our people believe time is up and Warrnambool is released to do his worst. As Murray Elder Mrs. Watson has said, Aboriginal people believe that the spirit child comes from the earth. We come from this earth. We are born from this earth. We believe that the whole of life is a spiritual experience and that we as Aboriginal people are actually more spirit than matter. Emotions can create chemical reactions in the body. If we don't face these emotions, it can create sicknesses. So for Aboriginal people, the whole of life is a spiritual experience. And so the whole of sickness is a spiritual process. The spirit cannot be in balance if it is out of balance with the body. If you're spiritually unwell, you can't help but affect the whole of your being. You see, the impact of colonialism has been huge. We Aboriginal people are spiritual people, and we are still recovering because of colonisation. There's not a lot of understanding about the part of mainstream Australia because they have the misguided belief that colonialism doesn't affect them. Of course it does. It's made them into the people they are today, which means they cannot hear what Aboriginal people are saying to them. Many are trying to run away from their own history, and we can only trust as they get older and more mature that they'll have a better understanding. You see, our people retreated into the belly of the snake, and it is only recently that we have begun emerging from the mouth of the snake with the renewal of our identity and consolidation of who we are as human beings. Around the storyboard, we can see figures dancing with open arms in celebration, performing a renewal ceremony. Following the storyline down along the right-hand side of screen, we see symbolized by the hand and snake is our renewed and continuing connection to country. The next piece represents our languages, our laws and kinship relations. Following along further and now coming up the left-hand side of the screen, at the bottom we see a returning to natural diet, the bush foods. The next one depicts reigniting and practicing our cultural ceremonies, values and beliefs. We can see here in the center of this board, the fire again is gaining strength, is becoming bigger, is illuminating more light, and the lines of connection are again becoming solid. And we see too, the elders have rejoined the circle and sitting in their proper place. First, we have to remember the good, the bad, the insane, and the hurtful. We then need to let go of those memories that vex the spirit. We then have to reclaim our cultural identity, and for others, their humanity. In this reclaiming, so too begins the process of decolonisation. We, the First Peoples, are not disadvantaged. We are the richest people on the face of the planet. We have not forgotten who we are or where we come from. We are not born into disadvantage or bad luck, but into oppression. Know that that oppression of my people is deliberate and intentional. Know too that our oppression is today. The benchmark is not whether we do well by the values and standards of dominating society. For many, this is simply an act of surviving. Our benchmark is found in how, in the midst of colonisation and continued oppression, we maintain the richness and diversity of our country, our languages, our ceremonies, our families, our laws and ways of being as Aboriginal peoples. We are a reflection of all of this. This is who we are as human beings. Let that be the benchmark. Let that inform you of who we are right now. No, the benchmark is not found in achieving who and what the oppressors want us to be, but in the maintaining and in the being of who we are. In our story, everything is already here. Past, present, future, the ancestors, the unborn are already here. We have nowhere to go and nowhere to leave from. This is it. It is. We do not do anything. It is happening, and it is our responsibility to care, to not interrupt, and to maintain the memory.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
I'll just invite any comments or discussion from our listeners as we it's a very still space, this one.
Yeah.
Still but alive.
Yes.
So, if you have any comments or questions or reflections, please feel free to put them in the chat box. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to find that from last week's exercise, in case you didn't have a chance to look at it. I'll put that link up in the chat box here again.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just take a second to grab that.
Thank you, Carol. It's yes, I think it's easy to overlook or become forgetful of that, I think. And for me, highlights the need for a treaty process between equals. And I think in entering into a treaty process between equals, I think we can all of us in this country can then with pride go about our business, I think, having then settled much of what we call the unfinished business or the big lie. Yeah. And yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's yeah, and that that requires listening, and we won't even get to the table if we don't begin to listen. Yeah, indeed, I think, Carol, but I think aside from the politicians, I think many people in this country would dearly love to see that take place, and I think there are many people who would support the idea of a treaty between equals, and I emphasize between equals. And I think in that, then people have to be, mass media is such a great tool, but it's also can be somewhat destructive. And when they put out headlines that Aboriginal people are going to take people's backyards and things like that, that's not the case. Never has been, and will not be. It's things. It comes down to a simple matter of and many people in this country already know it, but it comes down to those, as you say, Carol, those people that are in the positions that they're public positions where they can sway the conversation to simply tell the truth and admit the truth. I guess much like the South African truth and reconciliation process, and much like the South African people, Aboriginal peoples here have the magnanimity of heart and the sharing nature. So it's not as saying, oh, everybody has to pack their bags and get out of the country. That's that's a ridiculous thought, and totally unrealistic, and in my opinion, totally unwanted thought. And but I think with the idea of politicians, I think we vest way too much, much in them as people with power, even though they would like us to maintain the perception they actually have power. But I think the people themselves can actually move the consciousness, move the change that's necessary. And I think if politicians don't want to come along for the ride, then leave them behind. And I think, we can't simply sit back and wait for politicians, because history tells us, informs us that it ain't going to happen.
In lots of ways, they're followers, not leaders.
Yeah, and particularly in areas of truth telling, and yourselves on this forum and people as we go around the country. Such my experience, apologies, asking for forgetting. It's not. Yes, well, it's sort of, we know, don't we? In this country, it actually has to be sort of squeezed out of them over a very long period of time before any semblance of a sorry comes out, and then it's coached in all kinds of legalistic terminology and framework, so that there can be no demand for restitution, which is interesting. But having said that, when the apology, now, whatever you think of it, the emotional outpouring that happened during that period, I think, is more indicative, and the walking the bridge, reconciliation. I'm not a reconciliations and all those kinds of things, but I think they're true indicators of the heart of the people of Australia. It's not the one or two who actually capture the headlines. It's all those many hundreds of thousands of people that shed tears on the apology, the many hundreds of thousands that walked across the bridge, not only in Sydney, but throughout the country. And Trish is saying sorry can be cleverly crafted. I'm sorry you feel that not. Yes. Yeah. That would be the classic, isn't it? And the actual sort of nail in the wood when responding like that, I think. Yeah. And I think, and the perception around the apology, all those perceptions that have been created around Rudd and how wonderful. If you read the speech, it's very legalistic, and it has the weasel words, as Trish rightly points out. But aside from that, as I was saying, those everyday people, such as us, that shed tears and walked and all the rest of it, that's where the change is going to occur. It's not going to occur in the politicians. And I think it's we invest unrealistic expectations in people that are elected into the Westminster system of Parliament. And but that is what it is. And I think perhaps we need to shift the focus to those, to the bridge walkers, and to those who genuinely feel the apology was very necessary for people who were kidnapped during the stolen era of the stolen what they call the stolen generations. That was not apology for all First Peoples in this country. It was an apology towards the specific people that were affected within a specific time period of colonialism that were deeply, that were kidnapped and deeply affected by that. But no compensation, no restitution. And yet you will see in the same kinds of things in the sexual abuse, you'll see all kinds of things, compensations and everything being paid out. But Aboriginal people's got a sorry. So I think we need to really consider those things that we need to put forward, and we're seeing it again in the push towards constitutional recognition, which is a government orchestrated thing. Yes, there are Aboriginal people who, in good heart, would support that. But you need to, as Trish says, you need to understand the politicians' language, because they're saying, it's not that they actually lie, but they're saying something which actually doesn't mean what you perhaps may think it means. Felicity is saying the sad thing is that politicians are only as powerful. Yes, who vote them in or hold them up. They take it. No, from the people, but people. Yes, that's true, and that's fostered, and I think unfortunately we're going to see so much more of that with recent representatives into the parliament that have been elected into the parliament. So they have a following, obviously, and I guess we all know who they are. But I really pay them no mind. I think you need to keep your nose to the grindstone and keep plodding along. And Steve was saying people power can create real change. If it's strong enough, it can make the polls list. Absolutely. And that's there's been no change in this country unless it's been forced. The politicians, by the will of the people, have been forced by the will of the people, and I think that's an interesting lesson therein, and rather than governments setting agendas all the time and expecting people to follow and creating perceptions that it's actually good for people, the people should. It should be the other way around, really. They should be working on behalf of the people.
Well, John, and speaking of the bridge earlier, the bridge walking there, I was in Sydney at the time and talked to a lot of people afterwards, and what struck me was that people were saying they were shocked by finding out, the history there was, and had been so disconnected to it because I simply hadn't known that the biggest question was, what can we do? If I knew what I could do, I'd do it. Came up so often, and there is that thing that you say in the political process, what avenues are actually available and what actions. I mean, it's all very well to say, we need a treaty, which needs to be said, but what action does that leave ordinary, everyday people to take? I think there's a lot of people saying, "Tell me what I can do. Help me work it out."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this, and we may have mentioned it earlier in the in the presentation thus far is that we're not through colonization or the colonial, we're not through colonialism per se. So there's no clear-cut path or direction that one Aboriginal people need to go through, and of course the people of Australia need to go through. But I think in order to change things, we need to change the perceptions and the consciousness of people fundamentally, because strength, power really lies in the consciousness of people.
Yes.
Collectively, and I think we need to be able to talk truthfully and have a truthful conversation about the history and where to. And as hurtful and as upsetting as that may be, we have to remember it's not a personal thing. We're talking about factual events, and we're not talking. But because the perception that everything is okay in this country in relation to Aboriginal people is a false perception that is deliberately pumped out, and it has been since 1788. It wasn't mass murder. It was dispersal. It wasn't genocide because it didn't actually fit the definition of the UN Declaration of Genocide. All these kinds of things. As we spoke earlier in the presentation, the paper shuffling.
Yes.
And the voice of Aboriginal people is saying we want treaty, and there's cries for treaty coming much stronger now, I think. But we have to remember that a treaty is not simply a contract. It's not simply an agreement, as a lot of Aboriginal academics are saying. Oh, a treaty, we've got many treaties. We've got native title. That's a form of treaty. And no. I beg to differ with the academics and to say a treaty, and this is why I emphasize the word, a treaty is a treaty between equals. When we go and discuss native title, when we go and discuss other aspects of, or even funding, the power balance does not lay with Aboriginal people, it lays within the government agencies to ultimately determine what it is we take or not take. You will accept this or it's nothing. And that goes down, that goes right through, whether it's for funding, whether it's talking about native title access or working out agreements for getting, going onto our own land or anything like that. The power balance, and this is what really fundamentally it's about. It's about power balance and the abuse of that power. So we see video of Pauline Hanson being refused entry into a cafe. That people power is very responsive. Yeah. But mass media will have us fear, in fear of these kinds of bigots and those kinds of uninformed and uneducated people. So truth known far wide helps change the concept, which, and lead to change. And we need to settle unfinished business, because my sense is there's still an unease, even amongst people that have been here for generations. There's still an unsettling within them in relation to the country, and that unsettling will only be addressed when we sit down together and nut it out and address the unfinished business. And in order to do that, we need to, relax our fear, and we need to release our fear actually, and to do that, yeah. Dysfunction. Yeah, that's right. Empathy and or compassion. Well, yeah. I mean, I was talking with a friend today, and we're talking. Once when they were going to school, there was none of this kind of discussion going on, and I'm sure people of my age, and those older, would absolutely agree with that. But then talking to my other friend, she was. We were discussing about how the young people today are so much more aware, so much more, mindful of wrongdoings and the importance of justice for First Peoples to be addressed, and also their consciousness in relation to, the fast disappearing animal species and the degradation of the earth, or Mother Earth in this country. There's so much more awake to that than our generations or older generations, for the most part, were. And perhaps it's about the multimedia, has a lot to do with that with young people. They have access to so much more educative tools than we ever did in this current time. I'm just reading. Open and honest community journal is a solution to more than just the rights and the experience. Is what needs to occur for us to truly move from assimilation. Yeah. Yeah. I agree, and I agree. There's, when we look at it, and we look at it as a form of power, and how you use that power, it is what the effect is when you abuse that power to oppress or repress or keep another person down. It's expressed in family violence. It's expressed in the violence of colonialism. It's exactly the same. The root is the same abuse of power, or the perception that you have a power that you abuse. And the belittling of others you think are lesser than, and the other. So it does have far-reaching consequences. But I think in addressing the relationship and balancing the relationship between First Peoples and, let's say, the state, because, as I said, a vast majority of people in this country don't agree with what government does in relation to Aboriginal people. So when we fix that relationship, and as you say, then we're really addressing power imbalance. And we know that politicians love power. And if they have a sense that they're going to lose it, or they will do many funny things. And if you have worked particularly in Aboriginal communities, or you have friends in Aboriginal communities, you will see firsthand how, particularly remote communities, you will see how the teeth of government is sharpened, and very, very quickly. It's not what you read in the newspapers, how everything is lovely and beautiful. It's there where you see the power imbalance, and you have a people in the political sense, in the numerical sense, that have no power in that sense, um, other than their collective ability to come together and struggle. Whereas you have the whole government, which has all its institutions and agencies and the so-called letter of law for people to jump through. And it becomes very stark when you are in a, well, you don't have to even be in a remote Aboriginal community. You can be in a community in the so-called city, so-called urban areas, the homelands of, that are in fact the homelands of Aboriginal people. You'll see it there within organisations, unfortunately, and it's something that really takes you back when you think, wow, who are these people talking to? Yeah. The best people can come together. The world's too small now for us to be seeing each other as lesser or greater. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we need to. Yeah, we all want to get along, yeah, and just live in a good way, and we want to have that freedom to do that, yeah, and we should be able to do it in a way which doesn't bring harm to anyone else, you know. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's and this is all part of the conversation, I guess. Yeah, yeah. And it's an interesting thing of yeah of equal rights, I guess. But I think it needs to be thoughtful, because as long as the power imbalance is there, there is no equal rights. There's the rights of the powerful, and then what they choose to defer upon the masses. But we, you know, regardless of our tribes, our ancestry, our history, we are all human beings. And I think in a lot of ways, and this is a general statement, it's not definitive, we have lost what it means to be human, really, and how we relate to each other, and how we and how we maintain that relationship, yeah, and yeah, and there cannot be an equal rights between Aboriginal people and the state until there is a treaty between equals, and that will take a lot of bravery and courage from the forces of state to actually sit down and enter into, without having their big stick back up at the end of the day. That is being able to choose what they want or don't want.
And a lot of courage from the ordinary, everyday white Australians as well. I mean, that's that is a bigger job than getting the politicians on side in a way, you know, because the politicians will only act according to their constituency. It's the nature of politics, that if they don't have support to do it, they won't do it. So ultimately, it has to come from, you know, grassroots first.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there is that ground swell there, and because I believe, I don't believe, I trust in that, because I've met a lot of people along the way, good people that that has reinforced my trust in that the possibility, the capability is here. And it goes back to the question, David, you raised before about the bridge walkers. What do we do? Where do we focus that? And I think what you can do is as I've said in the decolonization process, is you have to ask of yourself. It's more
Yes.
about ourselves rather than uh, what can we do for the Aboriginals? What can we do for ourselves? Because until we because until we answer that as individuals, we will have that uncertainty. Because when we start to look at ourselves, our history, our ancestry, we were all tribes, and then we have to ask, well, what was my language? How did my language disappear? How did the ceremonies my people done disappear? What caused that? And we find a very similar situation. It's just that Aboriginal people are going through what many descendants in this country now, whose ancestors went through it, 500, 600, 700, 3,000 years ago, that continual role of what I call the beast, um, that continually takes, and destroys and plunders and all those kinds of things. So we're really no different. We all are tribes. We all have our
Yeah.
languages, etc., etc.
When we hear about uh, the reports that come through stolen generation, or um, the children's report, it's very easy to project our outrage externally, and
Mm,
yet, totally agreeing with what you say here. The real challenge is to take that within ourselves and to transform those feelings, those energies, those emotions, the outrage,
mm,
rather than empower, rather than asking what someone else can do. And we usually do it by expecting it of the politicians. But in a way, there's a need for first for us to transform those energies within ourselves, and then others will follow. And when
mm,
enough, follow or do the same, politicians will be right there as well, because that's what they'll be representing.
mm,
Um, and what you say about we're all tribal people. If we look at our own family tree, is spot on, I think, John.
mm,
And part of the decolonising process is to reclaim our own aboriginality, our own uh, spiritual connection with the earth, and you know, and everything.
mhm,
The worldview of Aboriginal people being holistic, and where everything is dependent and interconnected. Maybe not dependent, but interconnected with everything else.
mhm,
Actually aligns with what physicists are saying.
mm,
You know, through the more esoteric science channels there, even now. And that's a hard one for us to really take on board when we've been drawn into believing that the main conversation is about economy and um, protecting borders and so on. We've been sidetracked. We've been sold a pup.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's the belief is the sorcerer's strongest tool. Um, I say in one of my poems, and that's exactly what it's. They're quite good at deceptive politics, um, and we need to be able to perceive the difference or distinguish between the true and the false. Uh, between the perception of power and power.
Yeah.
Real power lays in the earth, in the sunrise and setting, in the storms, in the oceans. That's power, because
Yeah.
nobody stops it. Yeah,
Mm.
power. It's the the hurricane, the cyclone. It's Mother Earth is power.
Mm.
Politicians and people, well, we're quite dependent on that power, and that power is not dependent upon us.
Us. Mm.
And so we need to change our perception of what power is,
Absolutely.
And I see Felicity says, John, run for office. Oh no, I'd be too afraid of becoming becoming lost, becoming seduced by the finery of office.
Yes.
let me roll my swag beneath the stars, I say. um, uh, but we can actually have these conversations with our local members, and yeah, again, it's perceiving where power is. Um, you'll get a nice letter that you've attended their office and thank you very much, and that's about it. Uh, I think we need to keep talking and keep plodding along.
Mm.
And and for Aboriginal people, I say to the young people, that um, no one, and in the brief time from 1788, with all these things we've talked about thus far, many unresolved, albeit, but you cannot be stopped from learning your language. You cannot be stopped from walking on your country. You cannot be stopped from learning uh, who you are ceremonially in this country still, for the time being anyhow, and you can still enter into the law of this country for the time being anyhow. Um, but no one, these are things that governments have yet to stop, even though they've had a good go at it. It still continues, and it will continue to continue, because we are forces of nature. Uh, yeah. Um, so can I say thank you to you all, Tim, Felicity, Steve, Carol, and I'm sorry if I've missed anyone out this week. Trish, thank you. I'm sorry if I've missed anyone this week, but we're going to have a break. David has to go to the Western Desert area of South Australia to attend Sorry Business, and of course, Sorry Business is an elder up that country has a very dear elder has passed away, so David will be attending that
Yes, I'm not
up there.
100% sure of the dates we'll be travelling yet, so keep an eye on your email. It is a lady who was, in fact, in the film,
Mm.
and I came to know her very well and mourn her passing.
Mm.
And now, I want to thank everyone for your responses to last week's questions. They were very well considered, and appreciate the time and thought you've put into it, and hope that you found it a useful exercise as well. So if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, there still is an opportunity. If you scroll up the chat box there, I did put the link in. In fact, I'll put it in again. How about that? If you're still looking for that, that will take you through to a form that is a simple question.
The
Um,
yeah, and there's been and we'll present that in our next sitting, where hopefully a lot of this stuff will all come together. And Timothy, thank you, Timothy, for your participation thus far, and it's been really welcomed, and your contribution to. And Timothy's saying, how do we get the wider population of content lazy selves to dissolve the false ego selves and begin to see things as they are? Yes, therein lie the work, dare I say. Yeah, and I think that's a nice way of putting it, Timothy. And that's work we all need to involve ourselves in, for sure. You know.
Now, if anyone hasn't yet had the opportunity, sorry, my my audio has just started to lag there. If you haven't had an opportunity to have a look at the Two Brothers Walking, the documentary, um, here's the link. Not there. Here it is here. So hopefully you should be seeing that now. So it's always there. It's video on demand. If you haven't had a look, I invite you to take the opportunity to have a look there. So I'm not sure if that offer is showing, if that link is showing at the moment or not.
Yeah, getting the truth out there far and wide. Getting the truth out there far and wide. That's true, Steve. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've. It's just on an hour, or going on for an hour, 3 minutes away. Thank you, everyone, for your participation again tonight. I love meeting with you this way, and I hope that you're enjoying the discussion as well. So, as for next week, please, if you don't get an email, you will know that it's well. In fact, I'll send an email anyway. Either way, so we'll see what happens there. The way these things operate is that often we don't know until very close to the day how we're travelling. We do have a date, but we're not sure how we're travelling yet. And because it's so far away, it takes some lead time to get organised. So I'll keep you up to date with the upcoming episodes. So there's one main one to go.
Yeah, and I think, and David, can I just say that I think a lot of the questions about what is it we can do, that's when we actually sit down to discuss those things, and that's about yeah, indeed, Trish. If you tune in on our next episode, you will indeed see such things.
Then there'll be one just an open conversation.
Yeah.
On the broadcast following that one. So we've got two to go really in this series.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening.
And please come back. Please come back in next episode.
Yeah, it's a great way to spend a Sunday night. Okay, have a good week, everyone.
Yes.
Take care. Take care of yourselves. Be good to yourselves, and look forward to seeing you next time.
We all love you. We all love your hat, David.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do too. In fact, Thanks for the segue there. Uh, I'll tell you the story. I was up at about a year ago. We were up in Freegon, up in the APY lands, and a lovely old man there took a liking to my akubra, um, and he said, "Oh, you should give me that hat." And I was rather attached to it, and for desert work, it's just the thing you need. And I knew it was about four sizes too big for him, and so I held off. And then he come in and he said he was wearing this hat, and I said, "Oh, you should give me that hat." And I didn't realise that he how serious he was, because this is an exchange that I was not really that familiar with. I knew the hat wouldn't fit, and I was taking it very frivolously, and so I refused in the end. I said, no, I really need this one, and the old man teared up, and he was very sad, and he walked away, and I thought, oh no, I've offended him here, because there was obviously more involved than I understood. So I went to him and said, "Oh, you really want this hat?" And he said, "Yes." So I said, "Okay, well, let's swap." And I saw him some months later, and he was still wearing my hat that was flopping around on his head, many sizes too big. But I learnt something from that. It's not always about you know what fits isn't necessarily measured the same way for everyone.
Yeah. It's that gift of exchange, eh?
A gift of exchange, indeed, and I guess the fact that it was something we both valued and
Yep.
didn't really want to part with, but
Yes,
was appreciated the greater good.
you will certainly learn the value of sharing in Aboriginal communities. Yes,
That's right.
it's the first economy.
That's right. In fact, first time I met one of our close associates was a discussion. You'll probably remember the occasion, John, Piddenjarra class over your way, Croydon School there.
Uh-huh.
And the first conversation was about Nubbaji Nubbaji,
Nabadi,
which is
nabadi.
is this rather foreign to Western world, um, but it's the principle of exchange, of third person reciprocity. Let me just explain that. So rather than like me and the old man exchanging hats, the idea is that if you have something that you can afford to give away, you do, not in exchange, but in the knowledge that someone else will do the same for you. And so you, through your participation in community, always have, access to the resources that everyone has, each according to their need, and giving what they can. So it's a very foreign idea in the Western worldview, but one that's of course very common um, in Aboriginal society, and a very highly developed idea about how we you know bond together through that free exchange rather than a transactional exchange. Well, that's my little my little soliloquy for tonight. Thanks once again, and yes, oh, I see people have been active uh, on the chat there. Thank you. Paying it forward, yes, indeed, Trish, um, and thank you, Steve. Yes,
Don't we?
don't wear your favourite hat. My, well, this is my favourite hat now, Steve. My ex favourite hat is now someone else's favourite hat, so that's the way it goes.
If if the hat fits,
If
Sal,
the
that's
hat
all I'm
fits, that's right.
saying. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying. Okay.
Okay, well, we're 5 minutes past. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you all in our next broadcast.